Rambo in Arabic? No, this isn't a remake. It's a different world. A world where a bullet has the weight of a prayer, where a soldier is a prophet, where a woman with a rifle is a symbol of betrayal or freedom, where love is not allowed to touch, and where the camera shakes, not from emotion, but from fear. Welcome to the world of Arab cinema, cinema that is not a mirror. It is a front line. Today, we'll step into a space where images are weapons, where a script is approved by a ministry, or never written at all, where the warrior on screen doesn't drink whiskey, he prays silently before battle, where a woman can look but cannot touch, where love has no kiss, where homosexuality is not a topic, where the hero must die for the right cause. And yet somewhere in the shadow of that propaganda, there is another kind of cinema. Cinema made without permission. Cinema made from the soul. Cinema that can cost you your freedom or your life. Today, I'll tell you about that cinema. About fighters, about women, about faceless creators, about films that have to be smuggled like contraband, about narratives that shape Arab societies, and about those few seconds on screen that can flip one person's worldview upside down. Because sometimes all it takes is one look, one unspoken "I love you," one tear that was never supposed to fall. Welcome to the screening, a screening without a red carpet, without popcorn, but with a shadow on the screen. Because in the Middle East, a film is not just a film. It is an act of courage, or loyalty, or rebellion. Let's begin. Rambo in Arabic? That's a man with a rifle and a heart of honor. You know the pattern. Close up on a sweaty face, an explosion in the background. The hero falls to the ground, then stands up again, wounded, furious, with a mission. That's Rambo, or John Wick, or some other Western tough guy. Now imagine the Arab version. There is no whiskey, no girl in a bikini, no snarky one-liners. But there is honor, there is faith, and there is an enemy. Welcome to Arab war cinema. Here the hero doesn't fight only with a gun. He fights for the homeland, for Allah, for his mother. Sometimes against America. Sometimes against Israel, and sometimes against himself. Let's start with Egypt. A country that has its own Rambo, in a fully state patriotic edition. The best example. The series and films about Egyptian special forces, especially the Ekhteyar, the Choice franchise. In these productions, the hero is a soldier. Not just any soldier, a special forces officer. Quiet, humble, devout. He doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, doesn't crack cynical jokes. But he shoots, he jumps, he rescues children, he dies heroically. And then his grave is visited by the president. Or at least the camera shows the Egyptian flag in slow motion. This isn't just a film. This is an epic. Inflated with patriotism, scored like a Hollywood trailer, but in a halal edition. And the key point, the enemy is always external. Terrorists, Western intelligence, mysterious saboteurs of our culture. Sometimes an Islamist with a past in London, but always someone who betrayed our way of life. In Syria, the hero looks similar, but he serves a different cause. Since 2011, the start of the civil war, Syrian television and film studios have produced a string of war movies. In each of them, the loyalist soldier fights terrorists, meaning the opposition. The hero is a young man who joins the army because his father was killed by rebels. He swears an oath, he goes to the front. His friend dies, he takes revenge, but he never questions orders. He doesn't ask why, he asks when. This is cinema built on loyalty. Not loyalty to the viewer, loyalty to the regime, and that's precisely why it's everywhere. In schools, on television, in Telegram channels. It's information warfare in the form of fiction. In Saudi Arabia, despite the lack of an official full-scale war, we also get an on-screen warrior. He's the hero of the new state-backed cinema. In The Journey, a 2021 animated film, the main character is an ancient warrior defending Mecca from attack. There is no gore, no gladiator-style brutality. But there is combat, and there is a message. The Saudi warrior is not a brute. He's a sage, a protector, a man who knows God better than the enemy. The enemy, as always, doesn't believe, doesn't love, doesn't understand. But it's not only states that produce warriors. In independent cinema, we also see Arab Rambos, only more human. In Palestine, he's often a boy from a camp, a teenager, father killed, stones, a salvaged rifle, seething frustration, and uncertainty. Instead of heroic music, silence. Instead of triumphant victory, arrest. Directors like Hani Abu Assad, creator of Paradise Now, show young men standing on an edge. Their struggle isn't black and white. It's not always clear who is the hero and who is the victim. And that is exactly why these films never make it into Ramadan prime time. And what about women? In Arab war cinema, the heroine is most often a mother, a nurse, a sister, a fiancée. Her job is to motivate, to wait, to cry, to forgive. But sometimes, as in Kurdistan, the heroine is a woman with a rifle. In films from Iraq, Syria, or even Lebanon, we see women fighters inspired by real Kurdish women who fought ISIS. But these films rarely reach mainstream cinemas in the Arab world, because a woman with a gun is a symbol. And symbols can be dangerous, especially when she stops being a victim. So who is Rambo in Arabic? He is a man, pious, brave, determined, ready to die, but not ready to question. He doesn't ask hard questions. He doesn't show weakness. He has no doubts. He's a hero crafted by propaganda, not by life. Yet somewhere among all those war films, cracks appear. A hero starts drinking. A hero loses his faith. A hero betrays. A hero doesn't win. It's rare. But those are the moments when the screen comes alive. Because the real battle doesn't happen on the front line, it happens in the soul. And you can't encode a soul into a script pre-approved by a ministry. Let's move to love in Arab cinema. Love is the oldest theme of film. From Casablanca to Titanic, every culture has its own version of I love you. But in Arab countries, that I love you doesn't sound the same. Sometimes it doesn't sound at all. Here, feelings don't explode on the screen. They're born in a glance, in silence, in what's left unstated, and in the constant question, are we allowed to love in public? In classic Egyptian cinema of the 1950s and 60s, when Cairo was Hollywood of the East, romance was elegant. The protagonists gazed into each other's eyes, sang songs, danced. The woman, always in a dress and makeup, but dignified. The man, charming, romantic, slightly troubled. Kisses? Rare. Bed scenes? Never. The emotions? Vast. Like the Nile in flood. It was cinema of love, but not physical love. It was cinema of longing. Then came censorship, Islamization, and self-censorship. Romance retreated. Love became either marital or forbidden. And the camera stopped following feelings. In Saudi Arabia, for years you couldn't show an unmarried couple at all. Series and films presented relationships only within the family framework. Engaged couples before marriage, but no touching. Married couples after the wedding, but no flirtation. Drama after infidelity, but without physical expression. Lovers discussing their feelings openly? That's already risky. Because romance is Western. And the West is decay. In Lebanon, the opposite. It's the center of Arab romance with claws. Lebanese series are full of drama, flirtation, secrets, betrayal, and passion. But be careful, it's very televisual passion. Kisses? Yes, but gentle. Touch? Carefully choreographed. Bed scenes? Suggested, never explicit. Why? Because even if Lebanese society is more liberal, the audience is broader. Gulf viewers, conservative circles, diaspora. And they still set the boundaries. In Morocco and Tunisia, romance looks more European. A woman can light a cigarette. A man can take his shirt off. Love scenes are bolder, but they often trigger backlash. When in 2018, a Tunisian film showed an intimate moment between a divorced woman and her new partner, social media exploded. It wasn't about nudity. It was about breaking the moral frame. A woman without a husband shouldn't have a sex life. What about flirting on screen? That's where the shadow play really begins. On TikTok, romance is everywhere. On Instagram, Arab youth flirts without shame. But in cinema, flirtation is metaphor. Look at typical Ramadan series. A woman and a man work together. He looks at her. She lowers her eyes. He says something polite. She doesn't answer, but smiles faintly. That's it. Then, wedding. Because in Arab films, love without marriage is like a prayer without ritual purity. Something is off. And yet there are directors who rebel against this narrative. Nadine Labaki, a Lebanese filmmaker, in Caramel shows women who fall in love, make mistakes, yearn for physical closeness. No vulgarity, no pornography. But real tension. The film was banned in Saudi Arabia, but admired at Cannes. In Egypt, director Hala Khalil in Cut and Paste portrays a relationship full of insecurity, emotional barriers, and attempts. A relationship that does not end in marriage, but ends in maturity. And what about homosexual love? Here the situation is simple. It's not allowed. In 90% of cases in Arab countries, LGBT topics are banned in cinema. When they appear, they do so as hints, jokes, or pathology. The only space is independent cinema. Tunisia, films with tender-coded male relationships. Lebanon, stories where queer identities live in subtext, tension, silence. But even then, such movies are banned, attacked, censored. In 2022, Saudi Arabia blocked Pixar's Lightyear because of a brief kiss between two women, a kiss that passed in the US without major scandal. In Saudi, it was an attack on family values. So what does romance look like in explicitly Islamic cinema? In religious films, love exists but in a different form. Love for God, love for the Prophet, love between spouses, but always after marriage, never with overt desire, always with respect. The message is that love can be pure, but the question remains, must it be? That is why romance in Arab cinema walks a tightrope between feeling and prohibition, between intimacy and censorship, between the heart and the dense web of family, religious, and political codes. That line does not exist in the script. It lives in the viewer's eyes. Because what one person finds romantic, another calls blasphemy. One thing is certain, love lives, on screen, in metaphors, in stolen glances. And precisely because it cannot be touched too openly, it hits harder than almost anywhere else. Because if something must be hidden, it means it truly exists. So what is the role of the state in building this cinema? In the Arab world, film is not just entertainment, it's also a weapon, and one that doesn't need to be hidden. On the contrary, the bigger the screen, the better the range. Because in this game, the state is not the audience. The state is the producer, director, and screenwriter. Let's start again with Egypt, the film giant of the Arab world. Since Nasser, Egyptian cinema has been orbiting power. But after the Arab Spring, after Mubarak's fall and General Sisi's coup, propaganda returned with nuclear force. Take Ekhteyar again. This is not just a show, it's a state narrative project, designed to present the army as the only force that stabilizes Egypt. Soldiers are noble, devout, ready to die for the homeland. Opposition politicians are traitors, agents, fools. Religion matters, but only in the state-approved edition. The army promoted the show itself. The Ministry of Defense's official accounts pushed trailers. President Sisi praised it publicly, and the audience? Millions. Because it aired in Ramadan prime time, the slot when the whole society is watching. This isn't propaganda delivered with a fist. It's propaganda in silk gloves. In Syria, the situation is even more direct. Here, cinema is under the information ministry. There's no space for artistic doubt. After the outbreak of war in 2011, Assad's regime launched a propaganda offensive on the film front. Series in which rebels are savages. Stories of heroic soldiers saving children from jihadists. Mothers who give their sons to the army with pride, not despair. Directors loyal, scripts approved. Dialogues often polished by intelligence officers. Opposition has no right to images. If someone tries to show another version, they go to prison or disappear. Saudi Arabia? Their propaganda is more subtle, but omnipresent. The state pushes a grand narrative. Modernization with roots. Women can drive, open businesses, but everything within the frame of Islam and loyalty to the king. Films funded by government bodies, MISC, NEOM, the General Entertainment Authority, come with guidelines. Show modernity, show strength, show a successful woman who is not in conflict with her family, show the country as a paradise of progress. What vanishes? Poverty, social problems, inequality, migrant realities, all cut in the edit, or never shot. Iraq? The post-war industry is almost dead, but short documentaries appear, often sponsored by militias, especially those close to Iran. The hero is the fighter, the enemy, always the West. The woman, mother, widow, victim. The camera, a drone showing graves, flags, bravery. It's ideological cinema, raw, emotional, pumped into the internet. It works on young men, it works very well. And the Gulf? In the UAE and Qatar, the state invests in media, but not always through blunt propaganda. Instead, big-budget historical productions about Islam, merchants, Bedouins. Series like Kingdoms of Fire, an Egyptian Emirati co-production, show the struggle of Arabs against the Ottoman Empire. The message? Turks are oppressors, Arabs are victims, sovereignty is sacred. This isn't neutral history, it's history rewritten in the state's interest. Technically, how does propaganda work? Scripts must be approved, often by multiple institutions, Culture Ministry, Information Ministry, Security Services. Censorship is preventive. Creators know what not to write, because if they do, they'll get no funding, no actors, no locations, no broadcast. Money flows through national culture funds, which under the cover of development promote only the right narratives. Casting is controlled. Actors linked to dissent don't get roles. The result? Viewers get films that look professional, great cinematography, strong music, slick editing, but there's an invisible filter, and sometimes, between the lines of dialogue, you feel something is off. Someone speaks lines written by a political officer. The actor doesn't believe what he's saying, and the audience senses it. But they still watch. What else is there? And yet, sometimes a crack appears. A small, independent production. No approval, no grants, no support. And suddenly the screen starts telling the truth. About loneliness. About pain, about power, about things propaganda will never show, but that's the exception, not the rule. Because in the Arab world, a film, before it reaches the viewer, passes through an office that decides what counts as love, what counts as an enemy, and what counts as patriotism. Film stock is not just a carrier of images, it's a carrier of ideas. Every director knows where the line lies. It's not drawn in the script, it's not written in any handbook. But it exists, and everyone knows. If you cross it, you risk everything. And yet there are those who cross that line deliberately. They are not celebrities, not the festival red carpet darlings. These are people who make films from the soul, not from permits. Welcome to the world of Arab independent cinema, cinema that not only does not ask for permission, it knows it wouldn't get it. Let's start with Tunisia, one of the rare Arab countries where, after the Arab Spring, a real, though fragile, freedom of speech appeared. Imperfect, unstable, but enough for directors to start saying what they actually feel. The most famous example? Kawthar Ben Hanaya, director of The Man Who Sold His Skin, Oscar-nominated in 2021. A film about a Syrian refugee who allows a Schengen visa to be tattooed on his back as a piece of art. The metaphor? Brutal and brilliant. The system laid bare? Completely. Official support? None. The film was financed by international funds and banned in several Arab countries. Not just for insulting Islam, for insulting a system that treats people like exhibits. In Lebanon, independent cinema is a fight for the right to speak clearly. Nadine Labaki's Capernaum shows a child suing his own parents for bringing him into the world. A brutal story of poverty, exclusion, homelessness. The film won global awards but provoked silent anger among political and religious elites at home. Why? Because you're not supposed to say on screen that the system has failed. Her earlier Caramel was already a shock. A gentle but daring film about women, sexuality, desire, hair salons, divorces, no hijabs, no self-censorship, no shame. Shot on a small budget, watched by millions of women who never dared to say these things out loud. In Palestine, independent cinema is an act of resistance. Literally. Hani Abu Assad in Paradise Now and Omar makes films about young people who cannot win. They are trapped between Israeli occupation, Palestinian bureaucracy, religious pressure, and social judgment. In his films, love ends in tragedy. The protagonists aren't saints, but they are human, and that's exactly what the censors cannot stand. Paradise Now, about two young men preparing for a suicide attack, was unwelcome in Palestine, Israel, and Jordan alike. Because it didn't serve an ideology, it showed the tear in the soul, and that hurts the most. When a film is neither propaganda nor pure denunciation, but unfiltered truth. Independent cinema is not only awards and Oscars. It's also films shot for $500, on a phone, in an apartment. Without a microphone, without a permit, without any guarantee someone will watch. In Egypt, Morocco, Iraq, Syria, young filmmakers create movies that will never reach a cinema screen. Because they have no license. Because they touch taboo topics. Atheism, depression, a woman's life without a husband, domestic violence, LGBT identities. Some of these films make it to European festivals. But getting there is like escaping a prison. The film has to be sent quietly, without a name. Sometimes via VPN, sometimes via friends abroad. Because the director is afraid of being recognized, and of what might follow: no passport, no exit, or a midnight knock on the door. This is not a film. This is provocation. That's why independent filmmakers are like partisans. They don't fight with guns. They fight with cameras. They don't have armies. They have stories that push back against silence. Their greatest strength is not money, not VFX, not marketing. Their greatest strength is courage. Does this cinema change reality? Yes. Not instantly, not with fireworks, but over time. It gives a voice to those who don't have one. It shows what is usually hidden. It gives women a mirror in which they can finally see themselves as they are. It tells young Arabs they are not alone. And even though independent creators don't get red carpets, they have something far more valuable: freedom. Bloody, fragile, costly, but real. The screen goes dark, but the silence that follows speaks the loudest. Because in the Arab world, cinema doesn't end with the credits. It begins when the lights go out, when the viewer leaves the theater, when they go home, and ask themselves the question the authorities never wanted them to ask. Why didn't that hero ask anything? Why wasn't that woman allowed to love? Why doesn't what I saw on screen look like my life? And sometimes, that silence, that absence of answers, is the greatest weapon of independent cinema. Because you can censor a kiss, you can cut a line of dialogue, you can ban a film, but you cannot stop a thought that has already appeared. You cannot cut out the crack in a soul. You cannot glue back together a viewer who suddenly realized the world is more complicated than the sanitized Ramadan series. And that is why, despite censorship, self-censorship, and fear, independent cinema in Arab countries still exists. Not always on the big screen. Sometimes on a phone, sometimes on a USB stick, sometimes passed hand to hand like contraband. But one thing is certain: the camera is still rolling. And it has not said its last word. If this episode made you think, if you caught a glimpse of what the real struggle for freedom of speech looks like on screen, if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe, tap the bell, leave a comment, share this episode. Because the more people see it, the louder the voices of those who fight with cameras, not rifles. And in the next episode, I'll take you even deeper, to a place where censorship doesn't just cut films, it programs souls. See you at the next screening. And remember, sometimes the most important film is the one you were never allowed to watch.